Hello everybody, welcome to episode number 2 of the Training Tuesday, a live show for those who want to improve in chess. Previously we started a discussion of the problem of improvement. So we came up with some concrete tips on improvement in general. And today we continue this very important topic. And today I have a very interesting task. So I want to introduce the basic algorithm of making decisions in chess. Because you know what? A game of chess in general is the process of making decisions. So every single move is a separate decision. So the better decisions you make, the more efficient decisions you make, the better. So the more chances you have to win the game. So actually, this algorithm is really basic. So you can apply it in a raw form, but it would be much better if you will drive it home first and then try to tweak it. So it provides some flexibility. So actually, you will have a chance to change this algorithm a bit and to come up with concrete procedures that fit you exactly. A few words about improvement again. So we can divide improvement onto three major parts. So the first is knowledge, the second is skills, and the third one is experience. So I can't do anything with the experience because experience is on you. However, what I definitely can is to provide you with some knowledge and to show you how to train your skills. So let's get to chess material. Few moments. And here we go. So the first position is very simple. However, don't be afraid that every position today will be very simple. Actually, we start with something easy, and then one example after another, we will increase the complexity. So in this position, black's turn to move. Of course, because if it is white's turn to move, white just makes rook h8 check, and it appears a checkmate. So what should we do when we face a certain position? So what is our first step before making a concrete decision, before making a concrete move? So we have to start with the evaluation process. What does it mean, actually? So many people think that evaluation is kind of understanding who stands better, but that's not true. Actually, what you need when you make an evaluation is to catch most important features of the position, because this will help you to direct the thinking. Because usually we have many alternative ways of moving, right? So it's actually not possible usually to calculate all of them. So we have to focus on several ones. And to make that properly, to make that correctly, to have a proper focus, we need to start with the evaluation to catch most important features of the position. And this will just direct our thinking. So the first stage of our algorithm is the evaluation. So let's try to evaluate this position. As for white pieces, we can see that king is exposed, right? So by the way, the first tip every time starts with the position of the king, because king is the most important piece in chess. So king here is exposed. As we can see, it lacks defense from pawns, from pieces, and so on. So there are different ways for black to attack the king. As for other pieces, well, they're quite active, especially this pawn on f6 and rook on f8. So rook creates a concrete threat of a checkmate. The pawn is only 2 squares before promotion, so it is extremely dangerous for black. And black should be quite quick here, because if black doesn't come with some concrete play, with some concrete attack probably, then pawn simply moves to f7 if nothing else happens. And then after rook goes away from f8, it goes to f8, and white will have a decisive material advantage. So this gives us an understanding that black should search for forcing continuations, because, for example, something simple to prevent rook h8, for instance, let's say king to h7, simply doesn't work, because white can probably continue with the f7 or something, and then the pawn will promote. So king h7 doesn't work here. Black has to search for forcing continuations. What does it mean? So forcing continuations are checks, usually captures, and active moves with the attack. So to understand what to attack, we have to pay attention to vulnerable squares and vulnerable pieces. So in white's position, the only vulnerable piece potentially is actually the king on f1. As for other pieces, well, they're protected, not so bad. As for pawns, well, potentially weakened pawns in white's position are h2, f2, maybe a2, but again, black has no time for thinking of attack of pawns, for example. So because white has a concrete threat of a checkmate and of course a threat of a promotion. So that's not the case. As for squares, so vulnerable squares in white's position are those that not protected well. For example, we can see g2 square. So it is protected by only the bishop, but at the same time it is controlled by the pawn. So pawn controls this square. It is a potentially vulnerable point in white's position, and maybe black can exploit this vulnerability. As for other squares, well, we can see that bishop f5 controls several. For example, d3 square is a square of potential check, right? So it might be dangerous to the king. So it is also a vulnerability that worth our attention. As for other squares, well, it's very hard to imagine what could be problematic to white. So everything else looks like fine. And now, after this evaluation, when we understood main features of the position, so we understood that black should be quick, black should search for forcing continuations, and also we catched several features, several vulnerabilities, concrete problems in white's position maybe, and so on. We can get to the second stage of our algorithm. And the second stage is to create the candidates moves list. What does it mean? So here is another tip: never choose from the one. So actually you have to make an assumption that, for example, you have several moves here, several directions, several continuations, and then you have to calculate each of them and then to compare. So it gives you a chance when you create a candidates list, it gives you a chance not to miss something. And here comes another problem. So which moves to include in our candidates list and which not to include. So we have to focus on forcing continuations here. So that means checks, captures, and moves with concrete threats, moves, attacking moves probably. So the first is checks, right? So let's have a look which checks do we have. So checks are bishop to d3 and actually rook to g1. Only two checks. Well, of course, rook takes f2 is also a check, and we have to include it in our candidates list just to make sure that it doesn't give us anything concrete. So captures. As for captures, again, rook takes f2 is one of possible captures. Rook takes a2, but rook takes a2 is definitely not a move because rook h8 checkmate, so that doesn't work. So now we have to focus on checks. So rook f2 doesn't work, definitely. It's easy to understand. So if rook takes f2, then king takes f2, and black has no resources to proceed with further attack. As for rook to g1 check, it is also quite easy to understand that after king takes g1, black has no sufficient material for doing something. So it will just waste enough material and simply lose. And finally, bishop to d3. So bishop to d3 check is also a sacrifice because rook can take it. However, it changes something. So after rook takes, because actually it is the only move, because if king goes to e1, then just rook g1 checkmate. So as you can see, rook b2 controls the second rank, and now it is a typical checkmate. So rook has to take on d3. So something is changed in the position, and it is exactly the vulnerability of the first rank that appeared. Because now the rook doesn't control the first rank, so black has a chance to attack the king over the first rank. So here, just imagine everything happens in your mind only, because you have to calculate everything before making the move. Here, on this stage, when you understand that bishop d3 is probably your only chance, because only this move gives you a chance to do something and at least changes something in the position, makes it more vulnerable for white. So here you have to stop and again to create a candidates list. So as you can see, this procedure of creating a list of candidates continues on different stages of your calculation process. So that's how it works. And by the way, it is a typical trap, a psychological trap that many not very experienced players fall into. So they think that creating a candidates list is only the task for the initial position when they start their calculation. But that's not true. So you have to create candidates list every time when you understand it is the main direction. So when you calculate something, so when the depth is being increased on almost every stage, you have to create candidates list. And again, since you have no choice here and you have to continue with forcing continuations, you have to focus on checks. So here, after rook took on d3, black has again several checks. So a new one that became possible after rook d3 is rook to b1. Another one is rook to f2, and the third one is rook to g1. So rook f2 still gives nothing, so king takes and game is over. Rook to b1 gives white's king a chance to escape, so king goes to the second rank, and then after, for example, another check, king goes further. So it's not so hard to understand that black has nothing here. So white simply has extra material and continue an attack with the threat of promotion of the pawn. And finally, rook g1. So rook g1 was wrong on the first move, but it doesn't mean that it continues to be wrong for the next stage. So it is another typical trap that not very experienced players fall into. So it is mainly a psychological trap. So when they understood that move doesn't work, they continue thinking that it doesn't work even if something changes in the position. But it never works this way. So if something changed, then probably the move that was wrong might be correct in these new conditions. And if we check this rook g1, we can see that black easily wins. So if king takes on g1, we can see that now the first rank is empty, and after this check, white's king has no choice to escape, because these pawns f2 and h2 just betray their own monarch, and it's not possible to block rook b1. So after the only move rook d1, rook simply takes rook with the checkmate. So this example looks relatively easy. However, believe me, even some players rated around 2,200 just experienced some troubles finding this solution because it is not that obvious. And of course, here you can see there is this psychological trap. So if on the first move you think that rook g1 makes no sense, then after bishop d3, rook d3, well, you can simply miss this opportunity. And here's the question, right? What to do to prevent this bad situation when you miss in easy tactics or something like that? Well, the recipe is very simple. You have to create candidates list and never exclude continuations that were wrong one move before or several moves before. So within new conditions, these moves might be correct, like here after rook g1 on the second move. So the first move is wrong, the second move is correct.